Israel's military has deployed troops to additional points in Lebanon on Tuesday. The military also carried out strikes on Hezbollah targets in Beirut on a second day of strikes in the Lebanese capital. The military said it killed a senior Hezbollah official and also struck the group's command centers and weapon depots. In return, Hezbollah said it targeted 3 Israeli military air bases. The tit-for-tat comes after the death of Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei. His killing triggered waves of rocket and drone attacks on Israel by Hezbollah, prompting Israel to respond with airstrikes against the militant group. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, at least 52 people were killed and 154 wounded in Lebanon. Israel's raids also caused mass displacement across the country. The Lebanese government slammed Hezbollah for attacking Israel and involving itself in the joint U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Hezbollah claims its actions are illegitimate and says it's a retaliation for Israel's near-daily strikes on Lebanon, despite a ceasefire reached at the end of 2024.
We're now into day 4 of this increasingly widening war, which has seen a major military escalation in the last 24 hours and will undoubtedly create a seismic shift in relationships across the Middle East. Just before 2 a.m., a series of incoming missiles were intercepted here in Doha, sending shockwaves throughout the city. Our Euronews journalists in Dubai reporting fighter jets seen flying out towards the sea to prevent incoming attacks. The U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia was struck by 2 drones early this morning. This comes on the heels of an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, which has been closed indefinitely. Meanwhile, Iran came under heavy fire from Israel and the U.S. overnight, as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the hardest hits are yet to come. Here in Qatar, the airspace remains closed and the shelter-in-place order has been extended. Adil Halim, Euronews, Doha.
We have been hearing several military jets flying overhead here this morning in Dubai, but it appears that most of those interceptions of drones are taking place now over the water out at sea. Abu Dhabi did take a brunt of attacks last night, and further afield, the US Embassy in Saudi Arabia was hit by 2 drones, which resulted in a fire and also some damage there. Now, overnight, the USA and Canadian embassies have ordered evacuation orders to citizens living here in the UAE. The Canadians actually took that a step further and did indicate specific land exits and border crossings for any citizens that do want to leave the UAE into Oman and also into Saudi Arabia. Now, in terms of flights, we are still hearing a select few from DXB, the main transit hub here in Dubai, are still continuing to leave today. Obviously, once again, we are advising, and they are as well, to make sure you contact your airline before leaving. Do not go to the airports. There was a nice sign of reassurance here in the UAE last night, as the President of the UAE, as well as the Minister of Defence, was spotted actually out and about in Dubai Mall. They were talking to shoppers, tourists, residents alike, giving a real sense of reassurance about our stability and also about our sense of security here in the UAE. Jane Witherspoon, Euronews in Dubai.
Gas prices in Europe are climbing fast after US and Israeli strikes on Iran unsettled global energy markets and revived fears of a wider supply shock. On Tuesday, Europe's benchmark gas contract, the Title Transfer Facility, surged above €60 per megawatt hour, a sharp jump from the low 30s at the end of last week. Analysts say traders are pricing in the risk of disrupted LNG flows, particularly shipments from Qatar that pass through the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Europe has cut its reliance on Russian pipeline gas and turned to seaborne LNG. That shift has strengthened energy security, but also left the bloc more exposed to global shipping routes and volatile spot markets. The timing is sensitive. EU gas storage is around 30% full, below last year's levels, raising concerns ahead of next winter. Experts warn that if prices remain above €50 to €60 per megawatt hour, Households and businesses could begin to feel the impact through higher heating and electricity bills. Energy-intensive industries, including chemicals, steel and fertilizers, may also face renewed pressure, adding strain to Europe's already fragile economic recovery.
The Greek Navy frigates Kimon and Psara have been sailing towards Cyprus since Monday evening as part of efforts to bolster the island's air defenses. In addition, 4 Greek F-16 fighter jets are already stationed at Paphos Airport. Greek Defense Minister Nikos Dendias and Chief of the Hellenic National Defense General Staff, Dimitris Houpi, are in Cyprus to evaluate the threat. These moves are part of the activation of the Greece-Cyprus Joint Defense Doctrine, confirming that Athens and Nicosia are operating with a common strategic plan in case of a threat. Concerns were raised on Tuesday morning in Akrotiri when an alarm was sounded for an imminent attack on the British base, but a few minutes later the message was retracted, with officials confirming it was a mistake. The Cypriot news agency reported that France is sending anti-missile and anti-drone systems and at least 1 frigate to the Mediterranean island. Meanwhile, Germany is reportedly considering similar action following a phone conversation between Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Cypriot President Christodoulides. Greek media reported that US-made Patriot missile defense system batteries are being transported to Karpathos to enhance defenses. In a landmark speech, French President Emmanuel Macron has ordered an increase in the country's nuclear warhead stockpile, vowing he would be resolute in his response if the country's vital interests were threatened. The speech comes as European security is being tested on multiple fronts, from Russia's war in Ukraine to the expanding Iran war, which targeted Cyprus, an EU member state, on Monday.
Nous devons renforcer notre dissuasion nucléaire face à la combinaison des menaces et nous devons penser notre stratégie de dissuasion dans la profondeur du continent européen, dans le plein respect de notre souveraineté, avec la mise en place progressive de ce que j'appellerais une dissuasion avancée.
France has an estimated 290 nuclear warheads, according to the latest figures released by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Macron did not indicate how much of an increase he wants to add to the country's arsenal, but noted that Paris will no longer disclose the size of its capabilities moving forward. The address does not come in response to the ongoing war in the Middle East, with French officials stressing that it was planned well in advance. The French leader also said he wants to implement a program in which French deterrence is spread out across Europe, and noted that 8 countries have displayed interest in hosting these programs. Germany announced it would participate in French nuclear drills and, quote, the development of conventional capabilities with European partners.
European participation in the US-Israel military operation against Iran is certainly a possibility, former CIA Director and US General David Petraeus told Euronews. Petraeus said European involvement, particularly in a defensive capacity, would have been wise from the beginning, yet he stressed that no assumption had initially been made that European countries would join the operation.
It should have been clear at the outset that Iran is not going to limit its targets to just U.S. bases, Israel, and so forth. It's going after civilian targets, airfields, ports, and so forth in the Gulf states and beyond, and reaching as far as Cyprus, as you noted. So I think from a purely defensive standpoint, that would have been wise from the beginning.
The US general suggested that European countries could play a meaningful role in strengthening air and missile defenses. Despite concerns that the conflict could spiral into a prolonged war, Petraeus ruled out the possibility of US ground forces being deployed in Iran.
The House Oversight Committee released videos of last week's testimonies of former U.S. President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, during a probe into convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The testimonies were given after Republicans on the panel threatened to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress for refusing to appear before the committee and comply with an ongoing investigation. During their testimonies, which each lasted around 4.5 hours, the 2 former officials denied any involvement in Epstein crimes her knowledge of illegal activity committed by the disgraced financier.
Did you ever have any sexual contact with young women or girls in the presence of Epstein or Maxwell?
No.
Did you ever have sexual contact with any young woman or girl introduced to you by Epstein or Maxwell?
No.
Mr. President, with the benefit of hindsight, were there things you witnessed that could have suggested that Epstein was trafficking and sexually abusing young women and girls?
I do not believe so.
I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Like every decent person, I've been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade.
At one point during the session, Hillary appeared enraged and stormed out. During her testimony, she again insinuated that Republicans are only looking to cover up possible illegal activity committed by U.S. President Donald Trump, as she repeated calls to force him to testify.